Welcome to the podcast of the Political Page blog with commentary from an attorney and entrepreneur on the political and social issues of the day, from a rationalist, libertarian, and often irreverent perspective. This is Political Page, and here's what's on my mind today. Hello, and welcome to the podcast of the Political Page blog. This one is dated the 7th of July, 2019, and it's entitled An Orwellian Nightmare in Rose Valley. You know, the dystopian novel, 1984, by George Orwell, places his main character in this sparsely furnished little London flat. And the main wall is subsumed by this huge telescreen, locked on for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And not only does the beleaguered Winston Smith have to watch that screen, but the screen watches him. Inside or outside, at home or at work, everywhere, Winston knows that Big Brother is watching. And if he forgets for a moment, posters remind him of that in so many words. As Orwell put it, always eyes watching you and the voice enveloping you, asleep or awake, indoors or out of doors, in the bath or bed, no escape. Nothing was your own except the few cubic centimeters in your own skull. To make it worse, should Winston or any of his compatriots object to Big Brother watching, then the next question became obvious. If he had nothing to hide, why would he be afraid of Big Brother seeing what he does? I mean, Big Brother, after all, is a beneficent figure. Only Winston's best interests were in his heart. Winston should take great care. If one tries to hide things from Big Brother, one is clearly concealing guilt, and the results can be unfortunate. You know, the most ironic element of 1984 is that its author, George Orwell, considered himself a loyal socialist. He was totally upset by the totalitarianism that he saw in Hitler's fascism and Stalin's communism, but he thought they could only be remedied by more socialist philosophies. In this Mobius strip of reasoning and self-delusion, he freely admitted that both Hitler and Stalin were socialists, but they'd simply done it wrong. And if that sounds familiar to you, well, you're listening to the current American Democratic Party, aren't you? If we just do socialism right, this time it's going to usher in a utopia. And you can excuse Orwell to some extent because he didn't live to see the complete arc of socialism. He didn't see what happened in Cuba and Venezuela, East Germany, North Korea, Nicaragua. Each one of those countries inevitably suffered not only disastrous economic collapse and widespread poverty, but hopelessness. In the course of imposing government control over the systems of production, each one of them became a totalitarian horror, rife with political executions, imprisonments, and an iron control of news as propaganda. In short, each socialist utopia that tried what Orwell hoped would happen quickly became an Orwellian dystopia. But the progressive Democrats in today's United States fail to learn these lessons from history, but it shouldn't surprise us, should it? I mean, nobody could confuse the vacant stare of Alexandra Occasional Cortex or the wild-eyed derangement of Red Bernie with the keen intellectual gaze of George Orwell. And even Orwell remained a naive utopian to the end. He believed one could have socialism without the totalitarian flip side. And I have to tell you, it would be comforting to lay this clueless destruction of the fabric of our republic on the current stupidity of the ones representing the social democratic side of the Democrat Party, but there's a less comforting possibility out there as well. Because there's one thing that you can say in favor of the current democratic socialists is that they are not particularly naive when it comes to the totalitarian flip side. Every single right that they give lip service to supporting is actually just a catchphrase to explain why they're allowed to trample on that right. You want examples? Free speech, free enterprise, private property, freedom from search and seizure. Which of these ones is really embraced by the American left? Free speech is only for correct speech. Free thought can be criminalized. Those who espouse certain speech patterns are beaten bloody, while law enforcement stands back and lets it happen by a bunch of masked Antifa thugs. Small business enterprise, they give tons of lip service to that one, but every single Democrat administration promptly strangles small business to death with regulations. Private property? Forget about it. Everything that you earn is subject to being taxed and redistributed by force to people who didn't earn it. Surveillance is rife in the name of public safety. It's oxymoronic. Orwell said it at its oxymoronic best. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. And nowhere is that oxymoronic concept more obvious than when it comes to the surveillance state. Which brings us neatly to the little socio-political experiment I'm going to call Rose Valley. Now, Rose Valley is a pseudonym. It's a small, closely knit community. It really exists in this upscale area of this lovely southern state, personally known to this author. It's primarily peopled by, I'd say, retired professionals. It's an interesting cross-section. It's educated upper middle class America, but what happened is its rural ambiance attracts a disproportionate numbers of opposites. You have the libertarians who are lured by the lack of urban regulation and the kind of, self-serving zeitgeist of the place, and you've got progressives who are attracted by the artistic beauty of the area. And what happens is run-of-the-mill Republicans and Democrats are outnumbered by each of these poles. So in a country that's increasingly skewed to the philosophical edges, Rose Valley presents a fascinating little petri dishes of competing political antipodes, forced into relatively isolated cohabitation by its location, a microcosm, if you will, for our political times. Now, recently in Rose Valley, there was a kerfuffle of sorts where the progressives invited this citizens patrol program by the local sheriff through their secured and video-surveilled gate to perform regular patrols through their community. And until that invitation, the community had remained virtually crime-free for decades due to that security system. Now, the libertarians saw no reason for new patrols by the government. The progressives saw no reason not to have patrols by the government. A dispute erupted. And the ensuing conversation was enlightening and a little bit frightening. Because the libertarian contingent deeply resented this daily intrusion of slowly surveilling official vehicles staffed by what they perceived as wannabe cops, peering into the yards and garages of every house that they trawled slowly past. But the progressive contingent countered that every slow pass of that patrol increased their sense of safety and security. One day they might discover criminals in those very same yards and garages. Now, both sides openly acknowledged at the outset that there was no, I mean quite literally no, crime in their community. The libertarians pointed to the success of their private efforts to secure it, the gate, the cameras. The progressives countered that government presence would only assure more of that. Now, the progressives saw the overt presence of this government authority in the community as reassuring. It was a sign of an evolved society, the benefits of a collective. Completely on the other side of it, you had the libertarians seeing that same overt presence as oppressive, intrusive, a threat by the collective. Progressives insisted these patrols had only the best interests of the community at heart. Libertarians didn't care about their motivation because progressives were focusing on the intention and libertarians were focusing on the result. You know, I got to tell you, all of this should be absolutely predictable to anyone who has listened to the competing political arguments. For the last 50 years, Democrats always value intention, symbolism, appearance. Conservatives don't care about any of that. They value action, reality, results. It's the exact reason that Democrats can't abide Donald Trump and conservatives love him. Vice versa for Barack Obama. Trump is crude, his intentions appear a little suspect, but hell, his policies have had stellar results for the country. Obama was the opposite. He was urbane and voiced all the correct opinions, but his policies were a freaking disaster for the country. Which element one values not only determined the voting behavior, but also defines the mindset of each group to such an extent that neither one of them can understand the other from the outset. Success is determined by polar opposite views, so we just talk past one another. Common ground is terra incognita. Which brings us to Rose Valley, because at that point we got a little bit Orwellian. You see, the libertarians objected to being watched, but the progressives responded that, George Orwell here, those who do nothing wrong need not fear being watched. The libertarians immediately voted to cease the patrols. The progressives voted the other way, and they countered that rejecting these patrols would convince law enforcement there's something to hide. Objecting to surveillance only brings suspicion of criminality. It would actually subject the community to constant patrols as the government tried to figure out what was being hidden. And there we have it. To the American progressive in 2019, those with nothing to hide cannot object to Big Brother watching them. Big Brother is beneficent. Those who reject Big Brother must have something to hide. Objecting to being watched reflects nothing but a guilty mind, and watching will increase until that hidden behavior is uncovered or the objections to the watching cease. Steps might need to be taken, all for the utopian good of the community, of course. Rose Valley is real, as is the dispute and the positions taken by its residents, and none of the progressives residing there. They're perfectly respectable. Retired accountants and doctors and lawyers and educators. None of them would see themselves as budding Stalinists or acolytes of Adolf Hitler. They are the enlightened, the tolerant, the empathetic. They only want what's best and fair. Each individual one of them would be shocked beyond all tolerance to be likened to the antagonistic, despotic statists of Orwell's 1984. But where is the distinction? Thank you for tuning in to the Political Page podcast today. Original blog articles, complete with a lot more information and great links to original source material, can be found anytime on politicalpage.net. That's political, P-A-I-G-E.net.